Um, this is being recorded online, and so we've got a virtual presence of a couple people online as well as in the room here. So we'll use microphones tonight to make sure everybody can hear the questions as we go through the night. So I am Abby Hendershot. I'm the Executive Director for our Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. Happy to be here. Thank you for all coming. We really appreciate it. Tonight we're going to run through our slide deck and we're going to tell you about what MPART is, what we do here for our Michigan PFAS Action Response Team. We're going to go through PFAS and health. Tricia Doobie was actually sick today, so Lisa Fisher is going to cover for Tricia. Jeff Rhodes and Brandon Armstrong are going to talk about surface water and fish collection that we've done in this area. They are both with Eagle. And Mike Jury is our project lead for this project. He's also our PFAS specialist. He's going to be walking you through the investigation that has happened so far. And then I'll come back and just talk to you a little bit about our MPART website because there's a lot of great things. We should have plenty of time for questions and answers. So let's get started. So MPART started as an executive directive in 2017, but was made as an executive order in 2019 and made an enduring body. So this is a very unique multi-agency approach, one of its kind. I don't know another PFAS response team in the country. But what my job is to make sure that we're coordinating among 7 different state agencies on all PFAS strategies and implementation. And so that has made us one of the PFAS leaders in the countries around these issues. So let's talk about what PFAS are. I'm talking about, if I say PFAS, the PFAS, we're talking about the whole family of compounds, polyfluoroalkyl substances. They all have very strong carbon-fluorine bonds, usually used as surfactants, very, very stable in the environment. Once they get into the environment, they can biodegrade, but or biotransform, but not biodegrade. So they have great properties that we use in a lot of our consumer products, repelling waters, oils, fats, and grease. Started developing these in the 1940s. Today, depending on how you define PFAS, you're talking somewhere between 10 to 15,000 different chemicals. The problem is once they get out into the ecosystem, PFAS can become very widespread very quickly. They don't break down easily. They can, like I said, they can biotransform, but they don't really biodegrade. And so the other big thing that we're here for today is the fact that they bioaccumulate in our bodies, in the bodies of animals and fish. And we know that Lisa's going to go through some of the health effects around PFAS, some that we know and some that we're suspecting at this point. There's a lot of emerging science and information. We do have a need for additional federal standards. Right now, we've got drinking water standards at the federal level for at least 2, depending on who's talking about it, at least 2 for PFOA and PFOS for drinking water. PFAS uses, if you look at this different graphics, there's all kinds of PFAS containing products in our homes. Everything from the stain-resistant carpet. You probably had your couch stain-proof before it came home. The car seats were stain-proofed. The Teflon pans, the outdoor gear is waterproofed. Your waterproof jackets, your cleaning products, your adhesives and glues. There's so many things that have PFAS in them that we don't even realize that we're using every single day. Some of those can include food packaging and other non-stick materials that we use. So this particular graphic is a very simplified version of what we call our PFAS cycle, talking about how PFAS can get into the environment and then circulate through. If we start on the left with the PFAS producing industry and work our way through, you can have an industry that might be using it as part of their process. You might have a accidental release to groundwater, maybe it's out in the parking lot, or maybe it comes out of the stack. It can get into the air. Or it's directly discharged to streams. the wastewater treatment plant, the PFAS that gets to our wastewater treatment plant cannot handle PFAS. So a wastewater treatment plant is not designed to capture or break down PFAS in their normal plant system. So what we've done at the state is take actions to try to cut off those industries from discharging it to the wastewater treatment plant, because it's much more efficient to have industries put on treatment for PFAS versus having the wastewater treatment plant do millions of gallons a day. So those wastewater treatment plants, though, also create what we call biosolids. Again, if there's PFAS in the biosolids, it can then be spread out into the environment through land application. We know that PFAS are taken up by plants. It can be taken up by animals. And you can have, again, discharges to streams from the wastewater treatment plant. And they usually will sometimes send their sludges over to a landfill. A landfill then sends the leachate from the landfill back to the wastewater treatment plant, which also has PFAS from our consumer products. So you can see how this little vicious cycle goes through the environment. Ultimately, the residential homes, we're always worried about drinking water issues if somebody's drinking water that contains PFAS, but we're also, starting to think about septic systems, about what does it mean, what kinds of products are you putting into your septic systems, or what kind of products are you flushing down your toilet and sending to the wastewater treatment plant. So many different avenues. We've looked at a lot of this information. We don't have time to go into a ton of it tonight, but we will, lots to think about. So Michigan does have drinking water standards. So City of Wyoming and City of Granville have to meet these standards for PFAS, for everything from PFNA at 6 parts per trillion to PFHXA at 400,000 parts per trillion. The difference between those two compounds is the toxicity. PFNA is much more toxic than PFHXA, and so you have that difference in standards. These standards are also used for our groundwater cleanup program, and so if somebody pollutes the ground, they would have to clean up to these same standards. For surface water, we have 5 different standards for PFAS compounds, which we call our water quality values. Those also have lower standards if that surface water body is being used as a drinking water source. So for like Lake Michigan, where many of the cities here get our drinking water from, you would have to meet these standards for surface water. Oops. I'm not sure what happened to the picture in this one. Okay, so there's supposed to be a nice little picture of a glass of water here. And the importance of this is that you are never at a parts per trillion. You're not going to see the PFAS. You're not going to smell the PFAS. You're not going to feel it. There's going to be no way to know that PFAS is in your drinking water, which is why if anybody here is actually on a drinking water well versus paying a city water bill, come talk to us because we'd like to know that. We don't think there are many people, if any, but it's always good to double check. So the sites being investigated, we have over 327 M-part sites where we know that PFAS contamination is in the groundwater, and we know the source of that contamination, and then we have another 38, those pink dots are areas of interest. This site here, the Chicago Drive and Lee Street, is an area of interest because we don't know the source. We think there's probably multiple sources of PFAS in the area, but we don't know what the source is for this contamination, and my jury's going to go through that in just a minute. And then my last slide is on our Citizens Advisory Work Group. So these are residents from around our state who have been impacted specifically by PFAS. And they help us to recommend how to engage and empower communities, how to educate the general public. They meet once a month, and it's open to the public. It's open to anybody to come and join us. And we've actually got a member, Sandy, if you can raise your hand, a member of our COG right here in the room. Thank you. All right, and I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Fisher to talk about PFAS and health. And then we will, like I said, have plenty of time at the end for questions and answers.
Hi, I'm Lisa Fisher. I'm filling in for Tricia, but I'm also a toxicologist with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and I'm going to talk a little about PFAS and health. So first, I'm going to talk about the role of MDHHS along with local health departments when it comes to site investigations for PFAS. So our role is to understand any unique health concerns facing your community, and then developing a plan to investigate and address these health risks. So Eagle is usually the agency that's leading the site investigation, and DHHS, along with local health, are leading any public health planning and response actions that may be needed. So basically, our role is to evaluate any PFAS exposures that may be occurring to residents through different exposure pathways, and then recommending appropriate health action that's necessary. So as Abby showed, there's a lot of ways, there's a lot of industries that use PFAS or products that have PFAS, which means there's a lot of different ways that we could be exposed to PFAS. One of the main pathways of exposure is drinking contaminated water, but some other pathways include eating fish that are caught in water bodies contaminated with PFAS. I'll be talking about Keep Safe Fish program a little bit later. Some other exposure pathways to PFAS include accidentally swallowing contaminated soil or dust. For example, if you have a garden that you're working in, or something like that. And then eating foods that are packaged in materials that may contain PFAS is another exposure route, as well as the use of some consumer products. So all of these exposure pathways that I just mentioned have to do with ingestion, so somehow swallowing the PFAS. PFAS absorption through the skin or dermal contact is typically not a pathway of concern. So starting in 2002, the use of PFOS and PFOA started to get phased out in U.S. Manufacturing. And so we see this reflected in blood levels. So this graph shows blood levels of 4 of the most common PFAS that were found in Americans between the years 2000 and 2018. And that top line there is the level of PFOS in blood. And you can see that the levels of PFOS along with PFOA, which is the line below it, have decreased over time. So while U.S. manufacturers have stopped using PFOA and PFOS, which we call our long carbon chain PFAS, they have replaced those with shorter chain PFAS compounds, which generally have a shorter half-life, but we don't have as much toxicological data on. So we do have the most toxicological information about 2 specific PFAS. Those are PFOA and PFOS. And these are some of the human health outcomes that are associated with high exposure to PFOA and or PFOS. They include reduced fertility, high blood pressure or preeclampsia in pregnant women, small decreases in infant birth weight, and then changes to cholesterol levels, specifically higher total cholesterol and LDL. Some other human health outcomes associated with high exposure to these PFAS include thyroid disease, liver damage, decreased immune system response to vaccines, and for PFOA exposure, development of kidney and testicular cancers. So I will turn it over to Jeff to talk about surface water.
Hi everyone, I'm Jeff Rose, toxicologist with Eagle, the Water Resources Division. I coordinate the PFAS Surface Water Monitoring Program. So the Surface Water PFAS Monitoring Program's goals are to identify and differentiate sources of PFAS in water, determine where the PFAS is coming from, and then what particular industry, if there are multiple industries or sources, who is contributing what to the surface water in question. We also look for spatial trends, how it's changing across the landscape, and then temporal trends, how the concentrations are changing over time. A big part of what I do is determine whether or not we need to go out and do additional monitoring, such as fish contaminant monitoring, which we'll talk about later, testing, facilities effluent, etc. And then we look at, as part of our temporal trend monitoring, how we're doing in reducing PFAS contamination to surface water. So specifically for the area, we've got some surface water data here. And the highest concentrations we've seen so far are right around Spellman Lake. But we do have additional high concentrations in Batches Park. I believe that's Loomis Lake or Porter Lake. There's Lake Sanford, as well as Whispering Springs Lake down here. Anything highlighted in red is an exceedance of our surface water quality value of 12 nanograms per liter. And then as you go down towards the light yellow color, concentrations are decreasing. Typically, we'd be concerned about whether or not we need to do fish testing with values that are around 4 nanograms per liter or trillion. So speaking about fish testing, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Brandon Armstrong.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so I'm Brandon Armstrong. I'm an aquatic biologist within the Coastal Water Resources Division, and I coordinate the fish contaminant monitoring program. Okay. So if you're not familiar with this program, we collect fish all over the state. We test the fillets for different contaminants. And the contaminants that we're interested in are what we call PPT compounds. They're persistent, PFAS persistent. They last, once they're in the environment, they last a long time. They don't have a natural way to degrade, so they can be in the environment for several decades. B for bioaccumulative. They can build up at much higher concentrations in the fish than the water that they're living in. And T for toxic. They can cause human health impacts if you consume these at high levels, high frequency. And then the contaminants that we test for, you can break those down into 2 different categories. Legacy chemicals, or chemicals that we've been testing for a long time. We've known about their toxicity for a long time, things like mercury and PCBs. And then emerging chemicals, things like PFAS, where while they've been in the environment for a long time, we're just really starting to understand full toxicity. We've only been testing for these chemicals for about 15 years of fish tissue. So I'm going to talk about the edible portion monitoring, so the contaminants within the fillet, the portion of the fish that people eat. We do occasional whole fish testing. That's for looking at trends of contaminants across the state over time, and it also impacts the potential fish eating wildlife. But again, the focus of today is to look at the contaminants within the fillets. So this study was funded by the Environmental Protection Agency's Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. They got funding from EPA a couple of years ago to look at contaminants in fish, either from water bodies in environmental justice areas that have youth fishing events, or water bodies in those environmental justice areas that have public areas that where you can access the water body to fish. So that brought us here into Wyoming at Batches Park Pond. Part of the study, at Batches Park, there was not a youth fishing event. The kids shown here from other water bodies that we sampled as part of that study. But we did get out with our electric fishing boat and collect fish from Batches Park. So if you're not familiar with Batches Park, it's in the Wyoming area. It's just south of the Grand River, south of the railroad tracks. Here on the map, you can see it's highlighted with the purple diamond there. And then the picture on the left, that is our electric fishing boat. It's a specialized boat that puts out electrical current into the lake and temporarily stuns the fish, allows us to net fish easily and bring it back to the lab where we chemical test. And then
It's cheap.
it is cheap. So we were able to collect carp, bluegill, black crappie, and largemouth bass from Batches Lake. So the figure here are the average fillet concentrations of PFAS, the one type of PFAS compound. Does tend to bioaccumulate, build up in much higher levels in the fish compared to the overlying water. And on the black x-axis, there are 4 different species that we tested. Again, these are from Batches Park. You can see carp, much lower concentrations of PFAS compared to the other species. And then bluegill, black crappie, and largemouth bass had much higher concentrations of PFAS. And as for reference value here, about 50 parts per billion is where the health department would issue a do not eat advisory for PFAS in fillets of fish. And then I apologize, you're not going to be able to read this map, so there are copies there on the back table. These are, once we found the high concentrations of PFAS in Batches Park, Jeff went out and sampled all the surrounding water bodies. And where we saw exceeds the water quality failure, where we saw elevated PFAS concentrations, we went back out the next year and tested the fish. So I'm gonna work my way, kind of west of Patches Park, starting at Lamar Park Pond. Bluegill there, bluegill and pumpkin seed were tested. Their average concentrations were less than 20 parts per billion. Largemouth bass were about 61 parts per billion on average. And then further to the west is Porter Lake. We collected bluegill and largemouth bass. Both of those species had concentrations above that 50 part per billion PFOS threshold. And then similarly, Lucas Lake, bluegill and pumpkin seed also pretty elevated. And then further to the north, it's Spellman Lake, and that's where we had the most significant concentration of PFAS in the surface water, as well as fish tissue. Bluegill and largemouth bass exceeding 300 parts per billion PFOS. And then further to the north bit of that Indian Mounds Park, the pond there, south of Indian Mounds Drive, that had a bluegill concentration of 50 parts per billion. The other three lakes there, up to the south, Whispering Springs Pond, Heritage Park Pond, and Georgetown Lake. Those were collected last year or earlier this year, and we're still waiting for the analysis to come back for those fish tissue samples. And then just a couple weeks ago, we went out to the Grand River and collected a whole variety of species from the Grand adjacent to this area of contamination. I guess that's all I got. So I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa to talk about advisories.
All right, so the Eat Safe Fish program falls under the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the new do not eat advisories that we did issue for this area. So we have do not eat advisories that apply to all fish species for the pond near Hopewell Indians Mound, as well as Lucas Lake, Porter Lake, and Spellman Lake. And then, as Brandon mentioned, we also have an existing do not eat advisory for the Patches Park Pond. And we will be issuing a do not eat advisory for largemouth and smallmouth bass for Lamar Park Pond as well.
Is it posted around those lakes? Is it posted?
We are working with local agencies around the area to see if they're interested in posting signs. So that is in the works. And I know there's a couple of people that have requested signs.
Because I live on Mulvis Lake, you're right across the street from Porter Lake, and I don't see any sign.
Yeah, it could have been that they just haven't come in yet or gone up yet. I'll have to check and see where we're at with getting signs posted.
The Community Association would be happy to have those.
Yep, they're aware. Yeah, we've reached out to them if they would like some signs. So I wanted to talk about our fish consumption screening values that we have for PFOS. We recently updated them. So prior to this year, our do not eat threshold for PFOS was 300 parts per billion. Based on emerging science, we did update those fish consumption screening values. So now our do not eat threshold is 49.6 parts per billion. And as you can see, we have a number of different meal categories. So the do not eat would obviously be the most restrictive, and then we go up to 16 meals per month, which would be the least restrictive fish consumption guideline, not the issue. Yeah.
Back up to the other slide you just passed. So what changed from 23 to 25 that the acceptable amount is 300 versus 49? Seems to be quite a bit. Yeah,
so our what says here is the 2023 PFOS range. That was from an evaluation that we did back in 2014. So we had been using fish consumption screening values for PFOS starting in 2014. And then we decided it was time to update those values. So up until 2023, we had been using those values from 2014, and then we recently updated them just based on emerging science that has come out since the original 2014 fish consumption screening values came out.
Okay, so here with how many fish would you have to eat to be proud?
Can you repeat the question louder so the people online can hear, or use the mic?
Just better, just slide them.
Okay.
That's an important question, yeah.
There's a lot of rumors about that question.
Okay, we'll come back.
Okay. So if you're familiar with our Eat Safe Fish Guides, you will see our messaging called Get to Know the 3 C's. And just wanted to make you all aware that the 3 C's does not actually apply when the contaminants include mercury and PFAS. The 3 C's are basically ways to reduce your exposure to chemicals that may be found in fish tissue. So for some chemicals like to hang out in the fat of the fish, like PCBs or dioxins. And so when the contaminant of concern is one of those contaminants, we say, trim away as much fat as possible from the fish and cook it in a way that allows the fat to drip away. But unfortunately, PFAS likes to hang out with protein. So it's in the muscle or the fillet, which is typically the part of the fish that you're eating. So you can't really reduce the amount of PFAS that you're eating from fish if you get rid of the fat. So I just wanted to make people aware of that messaging as well. And then if you want to know more about the Eat Safe Fish program, including our Eat Safe Fish guides, which include guidelines for water bodies across the state, you can visit our website. And then just note that our 2025 Eat Safe Fish guides were released at the beginning of June, which was before we got the data back for several of these ponds. So the Batches Park Pond Do Not Eat Advisory is included in the 2025 Eat Safe Fish Guide for Southwest Michigan. However, those other 4 water bodies that I mentioned a couple slides ago are not included because the data came in after publication. But we do update our Eat Safe Fish Guides yearly, so they will be included in our 2026 guide. And with that, I'll turn it to Mike.
Or were you going to answer that question first?
Do we want to go back to the questions?
We want to use the microphone for questions. So
great.
let's do a couple slides and come back.
Good evening, I'm Mike Jury. I'm the project manager for the area of interest. And I will be working along with other people from Eagle and Department of Public Health, also your local health department, City of Wyoming and City of Granville. So we'll be all working together on this. So what is this area that we're talking about, the area of interest? As you can see by this picture, we're doing the quote unquote 30,000 foot view, and the starred area is where we're talking about. So every area of interest is an area where we have PFAS, but we don't know the source. So we have PFAS in this area, and we're not sure of the source. Could be one source, could be 10 sources, could be a lot of sources. This area could change as we get additional information that we find from sampling. So one of the things that we did do recently is we took samples of groundwater around Batches Park because that was where we first found our area of interest of PFAS. So if you look at it, you can see all the red numbers. Those are numbers that are above the criteria for PFOS or PFOS. And you can see no matter what direction you're looking at on the lake, whether it's north, south, east, west, there is PFAS in groundwater there. So that is helpful and not helpful. It's helpful to know that it's showing up from all directions around the compass, but it's also difficult because it's coming from around all this areas around the compass. So it makes it difficult. Also, you'll notice that it's at every level. So whether it be from 5 foot to 9 foot or 35 to 40 foot, there's PFAS in the groundwater there. So a difficult situation. So one of the things I'm asked is, okay, so we've got PFAS here, where's it coming from? So one of the things I did is I went online, you can do the same thing, and looked at known areas of environmental contamination. So if you can see the brown squares, there's about 80 or more brown squares. Those are known sites of environmental contamination, meaning under Part 201, they have groundwater or soil contamination. So you can see they're throughout the area. And so this is part of the problem I have is which one of them? All of them? Some of them? What's causing the problem? We don't know yet. We'll have to have staff from our different divisions within Eagle go out, do inspections at these places, and try to get a feel for what's going on. Additional information will come into us as property transfers take place. By law, people have to do what's known as a baseline environmental assessment and figure out what the contamination is at the property. So we'll find out information that way. I'll find out information from additional sampling that will take place. And as I said, the property transactions. So one of the questions that was asked about signs. So these are the signs that will be provided from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services to the local government agencies. Now, I believe a couple of the local agencies, was it Granville? They have signs up already at Batches, but these signs are available and will be going out to the city to put up at these additional locations. So it says, do not eat the fish, and it gives you some information on that. And it's also in a couple other languages too for residents that speak those languages where English is a second language. So what are we going to do? So my next steps are to continue to look at data. I can never have enough data. So I'm just like a lot of people. Show me the data, show me the stuff. So I'll be looking at groundwater, surface water, stormwater, and fish results. I'll take those results, put them into a spreadsheet, start looking to see if there's patterns. So sometimes I can tell by looking at patterns a source. There are certain PFAS chemicals that are associated with certain manufacturing processes. So by looking at those, you might get an idea, hey, I need to go look at this type of industry, have staff go out, take a look at that. So that's one of the things that we'll be doing. We've got a lot of data to look at. We're going to work internally and with our other MPART agencies, including the local health department here, Kent County Health, and they've been a great help already. And we'll work with the local partners here to place do not eat the fish signs at the local ponds. One thing, your assignment, because everybody has to do something here, your assignment is talk to your neighbors and friends that live around here. I'm looking for people who are on drinking water wells. By that I mean they don't have city water, they don't pay a water bill, they're on a well. If we know about those people, then I will get their water sampled at their home, no charge to the resident, because we want to make sure that they have safe drinking water. Do I know they do now? I do not know. So that's very of interest to us. We want to find out those residents that are on drinking water wells. So ask, hey, are you paying a water bill? They say, no, why would I do that? Let us know. So my name and everything is in the slides. Let us know. It's going to be very important for their health. So here, if you are paying a water bill, you're on a public water supply. And so this region that we have, the area of interest, Drive and Lee Street, is served by Wyoming Municipal Community Water Supply, also the Granville Water Supply. So Wyoming Community Water Supply is currently on quarterly compliance monitoring. By that, we mean they sample the water that you drink quarterly and look at it for PFAS. The Granville one also purchases water from Wyoming, so their testing is done through Wyoming. So our looking at those numbers to date, we have included some detections of PFAS and for some of them and some not. As the water comes from Lake Michigan, depending on which way the wind is blowing and other factors, you can get differences in PFAS levels in lake water. Lake Michigan water changes a lot depending on, as I said, seasonally, which way the wind's blowing and whatever. So we do that monitoring along with the city. And so we are looking at their drinking water supply, making sure it's safe. I wanted to point out that we do have a lot of resources for citizens. One of the best ones is our website. And that has a lot of information on there. There's information on fish. There's information on drinking water. There's information on firefighting. There's information on all the different sites that we have. It's just a wealth of knowledge there for you. That's a site that if you go to, And I work for the department, I've done this a long time, I find new stuff on there all the time, we do update it. So there is new information put on there all the time. So please go take a look at that website. You'll find a lot of really interesting things there. So another thing you will find on there is PFAS 101 is a guidance document that'll give you a little bit of background on PFAS. It'll teach you things that are helpful for you to know. Frequently asked questions that we have there, that things that people want to know, we try to put them on there. There are summaries of different sites around the area. So if you go to the map, online map, you could click on a site that'll take you to the web area where that site is discussed. There'll be a map and a summary of what's going on there. Also, our public meeting calendar. Tonight's meeting was on the calendar. If you want to attend one of the community action work group meetings, it's on the public calendar. So any meetings that we have are on the calendar. But really, the most important thing that you can find on there is that map. So let's see. Okay, yeah, great. So if you go to the map here, why is this a great thing? Every PFAS sample result that we have is on that map. Do you want to know what surface water values were found in the Grand River? You can go on there, you can find it. Do you want to find out what's in fish in the area? Or do you have a cottage up north? Or do you have friends up north or south, wherever? You can go on there and take a look. Each of the different shapes and colors could give you data on PFAS. So everything that we've done for years is on that site, on that map, including the public water supply. So if you want to know what's in public water in that area too, really, you will find that's probably the best map. And I'm going to brag it up. It is the best map of all the 50 states. It's the best. So one thing I should say is what is MPART? And these are the agencies that make up MPART. So Eagle, MDOT, wait, the Highway Department? What the heck? So the Highway Department has the Aeronautics Bureau. So airports unfortunately are sources that have PFAS at them. So LARA, that's where the State Fire Marshal resides. MPHHS, yeah, that's pretty simple. DNR, the Fish Wildlife Parks, and our military and veterans affairs. They are looking at all the different military facilities in Michigan that we have. And I will pass it over to them. And we will get those questions too.
Stay right there, because now we can start with questions. Okay. So I'll do this. Lisa, you want to come back up? And then we'll have everybody use the mic so that we can record the questions in the, oh yeah. You get to be the first. Make sure that, okay. You're gonna have to talk real close to the mic, okay?
Okay. My name's Rick Saunders. We live on Porter Lake. We're part of Granville East condos as well. And I guess I'm just curious, people ask me how many pounds of fish do you have to eat? Because it's kind of a hideous non-answer to that, but I get a guy down the street comes up to me and said, well, you gotta eat 24 pounds of fish for this to make any difference. So I just wondered, is there any, I don't know.
Yeah, so the reason why we have different meal categories is because we know, like, you might want to know what is the safe level to eat if I want to eat fish like 2 times a month. And that's why we have these different meal categories to show you like the different levels at which you can consume fish safely. So that's kind of what these different ranges are showing. So if the levels of PFOS in fish are less than 1.5 parts per billion, we're saying you can eat up to 16 meals per month. There's not going to be any risk of long-term health effects. However, if the levels of PFAS in those fish exceed 49.6, then we say that's too high, we don't want you to eat any meals of fish. So that's kind of why we have these different guidelines. And as far as poundage goes, we do have meal sizes based on a person's body weight. So that is in our Eat Safe Fish guides as well. So I think, oh gosh, it's 8 ounces for an 80 kilogram individual, and I'm drawing a blank on what that is in pounds. But then depending on your body weight, we have like a really quick calculation of like, if you're 20 pounds less than that, then subtract an ounce. If you're 20 pounds over that, add an ounce, and that's your meal size. And that's like especially useful for kids that may not be eating a full 8 ounces of fish as like a meal. So that's kind of what the meal categories mean as far as poundage. Did that kind of answer your question?
So looking at the map and
Yeah.
based on Porter Lake at 200 PDB, shouldn't need any of it.
No.
Because that scale is based on 49.
Right, and I do want to note too, let me see if I can pull up the. So this map is showing the average concentrations of PFOS in fish, and typically it's about 10 fish of each species that are collected. So we look at the average just to get an idea of what we're seeing. But for the Eat Safe Fish program, we actually use what we call the 95% upper confidence limit. And that's what we set our guidelines on, is that upper confidence limit, because it's just a way to be protective that, you know, most of the fish are going to be below that level. It's just to account for variability in the fish.
I have one question about the signs. Then who puts those in, and are we responsible to put those in? I mean, personally, or does the city come around and put those up, or who determines where they go? I mean, on Porter Lake, we have the north side of the lake is all condos and the south side of the lake is all houses. Yeah, how do we
Yeah.
notify these people?
So we rely on our local partners to know where the best spots are to put in signs. So like we've reached out to, you know, City of Wyoming, City of Granville, the Lake Association, our local health department, and basically just let them all know, hey, you know, we've issued this do not eat advisory. If you would like signage, let us know how many signs you want, what languages you want them in, and we will deliver them to you. But we rely on our local partners to know where those, you know, best spots for putting the signs in.
You say they deliver them to you. They talking about City of Granville, or are they talking about like us personally that we put them on ourselves?
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
so it's
I
up to
think-
us.
Given that, Porter Lake is private, so it's not city owned, it's not city run or managed. We would work with you guys to figure out the best way to get that to put up. If you need assistance, you know, I'm sure we can find a guy to come out with a
No, we can put them
full
up.
drive or something,
Wanna
but.
know who's-
The question is the other thing that if you have a lake association meeting, you want us to attend that, we can certainly come talk to your residents.
You guys are the association.
Okay. And the other question is, do you want 1 sign, 2 signs, 3 signs? Happy to do, whatever that makes the sense for you guys.
Okay.
I realize you probably don't get too many lake association people on the lake, but anywhere that you think the public might show up or might drag a vote, you know, I think it'd be worth it to put a sign up. The other thing is with these private lakes is, you know, if a sign doesn't get put up, I worry about the long-term people remembering that this is an issue, because unfortunately with PFAS, this issue will be here for the next 50 years. So, you know, posting a sign is really good for long-term memory of the younger crowds as
Well,
the
we'll
older
probably
ones
put
get out.
out a mass mailing to the people, but we'll put the signs up too. So
Yeah.
one more quick question. There's a runoff drain tile on Ivan Rest off Porter Lake that was put up years and years ago before anybody cared about anything environmental at all. And yet on Loomis Lake, as of 2 days ago, they just put in a huge drain tile runoff that's coming off a new parking lot and a 2-story building that's going under construction. And I just think to myself, everything now that's coming off of that parking lot and that place of business is running directly into Loomis Lake. I mean, it's a 30-inch drain tile that I watched them put in 2 days ago as we were doing some work around.
There's more than one pipe going into it, so we've been going in for a long time.
So by today's standards, I would just find that very hard to comprehend.
And I don't think we've got, we did surface water sampling, but I don't know if we
Get on there.
didn't get, samples.
The drain tiles?
Yeah,
No, we did not get any drain tiles.
we didn't get any drain tile samples
Yeah,
from any
good.
of that. Yeah, well, and it depends, right? Everything depends. If it's normal parking lot runoff, it's probably not gonna be, high in PFAS. But if they're doing some sort of car washing, car waxing, or some other type of stuff like that, we could have PFAS in it, at, higher levels that we wouldn't necessarily think.
Manufacturing places.
And there's manufacturing places. Like we said,
I
this
lived
is,
there 30+ years, and when I moved in there were pipes from the manufacturing place that moving into Volcas. And we were one way back.
okay,
That's all.
that's why this is so difficult. So do you want to talk more about sources?
Yeah, but first I wanted Lisa to tell you what a 8-ounce serving of fish is. How do I know? I know what a quarter-pounder hamburger looks like, and I know what a half-pound hamburger looks like, but I have no clue what an 8-ounce portion of
Not
fish
very
looks
much.
like. It's not a huge amount, no, but I will put Lisa on the spot here for a moment.
Oh, it's just on the very top.
Or you can stand in front of the mic like I have.
Yeah, so an 8-ounce portion is the palm of your hand. I know I'm definitely guilty of eating more than 8 ounces at a time. So always good to put that in perspective. It's like,
It's not the only, right?
No.
Other questions? Yeah. Okay, we gotta get it right up to your level. And also, I'm Porter Lake. Where is the water coming from that's getting dumped in the Porter Lake?
Well, there are multiple. I'm not from the area, so I'm gonna hope that one of our staff is from our Grand Rapids district, has an idea. So there's going to be a couple different things. One is there's groundwater. So where we're standing right now underneath our feet is groundwater. It's water that's there. It could be from rain, it could be from back in the day of glaciers, whatever. So there's groundwater. The groundwater around this area is contaminated with PFAS. Groundwater is moving towards the Grand River and towards other areas. So depending on how deep that water is, it could be headed towards the Grand River. If it's shallower, it's headed towards one of the county drains, one of the creeks around here. So that's one thing. There are other things that can be going into the lake. So if there are drain tiles from stormwater, so for example, things like along the highway, when it rains, we don't want all this water on the road, so we drain it off, goes into the stormwater catch basin. That has to go somewhere. It could be going into a creek, could be going into a county drain, it could be going into that lake also. So what would have to happen is we'll have to walk the bank of the lake, see where we see pipes, and we're going to have to try to figure out where do they. So
In July, I know there's groundwater, but in July, I literally watched a ton of water being flushed into our lake for hours. I filmed it, hours and hours. That came from somewhere, and it was definitely dirty water. It was full of yard waste, etc.
It comes from Buck Creek. Buck Creek comes right alongside of Porter Lake, and it's supposed to go to the Wyoming system.
Can you use the microphone so
Across the
the
street.
people online can hear you? Thank you.
The water that comes out of the pipe that Steph's referring to comes out of Buck Creek, and supposed to go underneath the road, goes over to Wyoming, and then dumps wherever it goes. But when it rains, it's high, there's an overflow tube, and then it goes straight into Porter Lake. Porter Lake is strictly a runoff rain. That's why the lake's been so low all summer long. There's not fed by anything. It's basically the height of the lake is strictly by the rain and runoff. That's the only thing that controls.
Where was it for that many hours? I mean, it was.
Oh, that creek gets backed up. It'll drain into our lake for half a day. And every time you get a heavy rain, and a lot of times that screen, which the city's supposed to take care of, but they never do or hardly ever do, that'll get plugged with debris and crap from Buck Creek, and then it'll overflow into Porter Lake. And then you get whatever that junk is that's backed up before it hits that stream, goes directly into Porter Lake. It's a very bad system right there, and we have tried relentlessly to come up with a solution. And because the problem with that is, and this is obviously the subject, but nobody says it's there. It does not exist. So like a lot of things that were built then back in the day, they just built them however they wanted to build them, and now nobody takes care of it because technically on paper it doesn't exist.
Does it fall under your dream, Commissioner?
We've been down that
You've
route.
been, okay, I thought I'd ask.
We've been down every route there is, and unfortunately it's just, but that's where the water comes from. It's just coming from the backed up of Buck Creek.
Buck as in the deer, the male deer, or, okay, just wanted to be sure.
That answers your question.
Is this the first time you tested for PFAS on our lakes?
Yes,
On our lakes?
yes.
So there's no prior testing?
Well, let me look at Jeff. Are you aware of any?
There's no prior testing for Porter Lake or Lucas Lake. We have tested Buck Creek in the past. I'll repeat myself.
Okay, now,
Yeah.
I don't know how many people are here from Porter Lake, but because we're on the Lake Association, I can say that the lake was tested in 5 of 23. Now, it wasn't tested for PFAS, but for E. coli and all that other stuff, there's hardly even measurable. So it's a very healthy lake up until we got this information.
Yeah, we've tested Buck Creek previously. I believe that was back in 2018 for PFAS specifically. We hadn't tested Porter Lake or Lewis Lake until I believe it was 2 years ago or last year. Buck Creek has fairly consistently been around 4 parts per trillion PFOS, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, 3.5, 3.4. Yep. Yeah, we ran Buck Creek up pretty high. Additionally, what's not shown here is some of my colleagues' data that do specifically stormwater, and then like overflow water out in the Virgin Pollutant section. They went out and tested the city of Wyoming and Granville's drains, their stormwater drains, the underground pipes where you have pole manhole cover to get in. And they didn't see too many values above 5 parts per trillion, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, we are live streaming and recording this, so just so everybody can talk nicely into the microphone. Do we have another question? Yeah, let's go back here.
Yeah, since you're up right now, I was just wondering, for your average test, what percentage of those do you think are below 1.5? Like the 1/16 deal,
Let's see, so.
just overall in Michigan?
Yeah, so our reporting limit is 2 to 4. So the reporting limit is the concentration at which the lab is confident that you're within a certain percentage of the true value. So it's typically like 95%. So below the reporting limit, there's a larger leeway in terms of like, say it's 1.5, it might be up to like 1.8, 1.2, that kind of thing. But in terms of values in this area or values across the state?
You're talking fish, right?
No, just water testing.
Across the
Or,
state?
I guess fish testing across the state. Yeah.
Fish testing is brand new. Water testing,
You said 1.5, that's the lower
Yeah.
limit for the advisories.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the question, how many times do we see fish tissue samples below 1.5?
Yeah, what percentage are below 1.5?
It's a low percentage. We do have systems where we don't have, it's non-detect, so less than a quarter part per billion. Those are pretty rare. We do see maybe some percent of our fish have detectable levels of PFOS in fish tissue. And then when you get in industrial areas like this, in cities, it's going to be a higher concentration of the 5.
Okay, so across Michigan, over 90% are on this beware list?
Over 90% will have detectable levels, above that quarter part per billion. I don't know how many would be above 1.5. I won't get that yet.
Okay, that's my question.
and just to add on to that, the strange thing about PFOS specifically is it bioaccumulates to a very significant degree within fish tissue. Depending upon where the specific type of fish falls in the food chain, but our bioaccumulation levels range from about 3,000 up to 6,000. So it's going to be, from 3,000 to 6,000 times higher within fish tissue than it is in the water. So even an extremely low, like a level we can't detect at, value for the surface water can lead to detectable levels within fish tissue.
I should mention, interesting question, because one of the things that can be confusing is that when we're talking about fish tissue, we're talking in parts per billion of B, and when we're talking about water, we're talking in parts per trillion. Yeah, so when you look at the data on the screen, this data is in parts per trillion. The fish data is dealing with parts per billion. So always try to noodle what does that number mean. Now, the good news for you is if you wanted to know, remember I talked about our map, you can go to our map and you can click on the map. If there's a water body you're interested in, there's a specific color and symbol that says fish test. So you can go anywhere in the state of Michigan and take a look. You want to go to the UP, take a look and see what we sampled there, here, wherever you might like to go. If we sampled the fish for PFAS, it's on there. So that's one of the really great things that makes it easy. When you ask a question like that, pick a spot. Go find a wilderness spot in UP, see if we sampled fish, get a feel for what we found there. So that's one of the really great things about this map. Same with surface water. If you're curious, I wonder what it's like in the Tequamanon River, for example, by the Tequamanon Falls. You take a look, it'll be there. So that is one of the really great things about GIS with our system. If you're interested, you should be able to find it there. And we do update that all the time.
I'm gonna add on to that too.
Please.
So for the Eat Safe Fish program, we test fish for more than just PFAS. So we also test all fish for mercury, and then depending on where the fish are coming from, we may test for PCBs, dioxins, selenium, other contaminants of concern. So if you want to know what all the levels of all contaminants are, that data is also available on our Eat Safe Fish website.
Is it safer to eat smaller fish?
It's safer to eat smaller fish. We want to, Brandon?
Before we started testing for PFAS, the answer to that would be yes. But now with PFAS testing for the last 15 years, it really depends on the system. In some lakes, we do see higher concentrations than what we built compared to large PFAS. So it really depending, how close the contamination source would be.
Have you tested the waters in Millennium Park? For the fish?
Yes, we have. I don't have the shown on the map here. But yeah, we did water testing and fish tissue testing in one part.
And they're safe?
There's some advisory.
Yeah, we have Eat Safe Fish guides in the back. Millennium Park Ponds is in there. I don't remember off the top of my head what guideline we have, but if you look in there, Carly, she's our Eat Safe Fish program manager. She can get you a copy. She's right here.
Oh, I was looking off the top of my head. So yeah, Millennium Park, I think was fairly low because we did do testing, but somebody could look it up in the guide and we can actually tell you in real time here. Those dots that you see on this map, the lighter colored ones up there, I believe are in Millennium Park.
Yeah, that's correct. The Millennium Park values for surface water anyway, were quite low. I believe they were mostly non-detect. When we list values on the surface water map, any non-detects are actually set at the method detection limit, just because it's a conservative estimate of concentrations.
Yeah, and we do have significant areas of the state. So the Huron River down by Ann Arbor is one of those areas where we have a do not eat for like the entire river system. Pretty significant. We've seen concentrations come down with the source controls and other measures that have been taken. But fish is a tricky thing. I think one of the big things we want to get across tonight is this Eat Safe Fish program is voluntary. So it's not saying the fishing is outlawed. It's not saying that, you can't eat your 24 pounds of fish this year. But
if you're a sensitive population, if you are immunocompromised, if you are potentially looking at getting pregnant, or you've got small children, you're probably gonna wanna think about this information and think twice. You know, those of us who are well past our seasoned years, maybe we don't care as much. But we gotta think about the people that we're feeding and the people who are in our households as well. So good questions, good questions. What else do we have? Other questions, or did we get the answer on Millennium Park?
There is an advisory for Millennium Park. It's for bluegill and sunfish. It's 6 per year. I do want to note that we have general Michigan guidelines as well. So if you see a water body and you don't see results for it, you can go on our Eat Safe Fish website, or I think at the start of the guides. And there's a general Michigan guideline that we recommend for water bodies that may not have fish values or fish screening values. So just wanted to throw that out there as well.
So 6 per year.
6 per year for Millennium Park for bluegill and sunfish.
Was it based on PFAS?
Yes.
Yeah, so yes, based on PFOS. Perfect. Okay. Other questions? Go ahead.
One more quick question. On Loomis Lake, we have a sizable island on that lake. The entire Granville East condos is irrigated from the water from Loomis Lake. And there's quite a few co-owners that have gardens on this island, and they sprinkle them, irrigate them from the water of Loomis Lake. Now, I realize the PFAS and the fish has nothing to do with that, but that's a question that we're gonna get asked. And I guess I'm asking you, is it something we need to be concerned about as far as irrigating? Nobody cares about the grass because nobody's eating the grass. But the other part is something that I'm sure is gonna be brought up.
What, with the gardens?
Those are vegetable growth.
Yeah, so we did do, a small pilot study testing some backyard garden produce, in areas that had highly contaminated groundwater. And so those backyard gardens were irrigated with that contaminated, groundwater. And we did see some PFAS in produce. The study was too small and there were too many different types of produce to really get an idea of what would be like a unhealthy level of different PFAS in produce. We just don't know that much about like what would be a safe level, but we do have best management practices available. They are on the MPART website under the frequently asked questions tab. Things like using, raised beds, clean soil, clean mulch, and then of course using like a clean source of drinking water. Those are all ways to reduce contamination in backyard produce. So those are some of the best management practices that we have available.
Number of word concerned with is the water.
Yeah. Water. Yeah.
The water.
Go back to the water slide.
That should be on that map, right?
Hold on. Yeah. So we would be looking at these numbers to compare for groundwater. So if they're using the pond water, and you probably use the groundwater standards, not necessarily the surface water standards, if you're trying to use it for backyard garden type stuff. So if I'm understanding correctly, you've got people using water directly out of Loomis Lake for irrigation or watering the gardens.
Yes.
Okay. And I don't know if we have enough data to know exactly what the concentration is of Loomis Lake. I think we've done one grab sample.
Correct, it was a single graph sample.
So we got,
Variability, temporally.
yeah, so we're gonna have some, so we got one sample. That's all we've really got to try to understand. So our recommendations are, obviously, if you don't want PFAS in the produce, you would not use that water to irrigate the produce or to irrigate your space. That being said, we know that PFOS especially can be taken up into plants and into vegetables, but not all the plants and all the vegetables do it the same way. So for example, we know on, farm fields that have contaminated soil, the PFAS, the longer chain, gets stuck in the roots, gets stuck in the stalks, and by the time they get to the corn kernels, there's very little PFAS. So if they're just eating the corn kernels, it's great, but if they're feeding the whole stalk to the cows or using it for other things, or if the cows are grazing on the dirt, again, you're gonna have issues. Or you could potentially have issues. In the case of backyard chickens, we know that if the chickens are out on contaminated soils, those chickens then, as they peck the soils for their feed, then will be consuming PFAS and will be transferring it to their eggs. So every situation is going to be different. We can't give you much more than general guidance around backyard gardens because it really would depend on the plant, how often they're watering, how long the growing season is, all of that. We've got a lot of friends out in Maine who are tackling PFAS on contaminated farms, and they're seeing even differences in a first cut of hay versus a second cut of hay, like a tenfold difference in the concentrations. They're not sure why, thinking it's something to do with the watering cycle or something like that. So if you maybe are in drought, it might be more concentrated versus a lot more water might be taken out. So there's a lot we don't know about PFAS, especially PFOS transference in the crop system. Yeah, that's an emerging area of research. So yeah, I think the biggest thing is they just need to be aware that it's happening, and then, you know, again, it's a choice situation, right? Good question.
Yeah, why did it take this long to test our lakes? If you've known about this for 15 years and the other lakes, why weren't ours tested until now?
Great question. So we have gone through and we started back in 2017 testing all of the drinking water. So drinking water is our primary route of exposure. So in 2017, 18, 19, we spent millions of dollars testing all of the drinking water for all municipal systems in the state of Michigan. After that, we started testing and looking at our wastewater treatment plants. What were they putting out? And we started looking at landfills. We started with the really obvious sources of PFAS. We've learned a lot along the way. So Jeff and Brandon's group has been doing a lot of monitoring for PFAS through the last 6-7 years, a lot of it. And so we are now starting to get to some of these smaller lakes. But you guys want to talk about your annual monitoring programs that you feel?
Sure. Yeah, we, in terms of surface water monitoring, we started, as Abby mentioned, doing the source waters for drinking water intakes, the Great Lakes, the Huron River, St. Joe, etc. Then we switched to areas of known significant contamination around the Escoda area for former works with air sport base, down Parchment. Then we spread out to all of the known MPART sites at that time. And MPART sites are added quite frequently as they're discovered. So we'll go back through and we'll revisit watersheds where new MPART sites are added. And now we're branching out into mostly the areas with no evidence of, or no current evidence of contamination. That doesn't mean they're not contaminated, but we don't have anything to suggest that they are. And then we're targeting areas where fish are being caught for consumption or recreation setup. And we do 5 watersheds per year on average, and about 40 to 80 samples per watershed. This year we did around 450 samples. I had a decent year. Brandon?
Why don't you define a watershed for that?
Yeah, a watershed
Like the
is
Grand River, that's
right. So the Grand
all the
River
way from Jackson to.
yeah. The Grand River is actually broken up into 3 watersheds. So the watershed is an area of drainage. So we've got like 2 watersheds. And so the area of drainage for a watershed is largely driven by topography. So as water runs down gradient downhill, it's going to collect into smaller tributaries, which feed a larger like creek or stream or river, and then that will go into the main stem of the river. So like for the Grand is the Grand River, and then the Grand River eventually empties out to the lake. So the area of drainage for the Grand River will be the Grand River watershed.
Yeah, as far as fish contaminant monitoring, we've been looking at contaminants in fish since late seventies, early eighties when the program started. We didn't start looking at PFAS until about 2010. We'll be doing a few watersheds at that time, or water bodies at that time. Really ramped up our PFAS testing in 2018. So it's still pretty new for us. We get to anywhere from 70 to 90. The number seems to continuously grow every year. We continuously meet record number of samples that we send to the lab each year. I think this year we're going to be sending about 2,100 samples to the lab. So when you're talking about a statewide program, we can only do 70 to 90 sites here. It's going to take a while to hit every water body. So,
How many weights are in the state?
Ooh, how many weights?
yeah, it's a good question. Or
Yeah.
Google.
A lot,
Yeah.
a lot. So it will take us some amount of time to get samples from all of them.
Abby, I do have a couple online too.
Oh, do you have one online? Okay, hold on. We'll ask that question.
Yeah, so reading a couple questions from online. First is for those online asking about handouts that we're receiving, so we can get them to them via email. For everyone who registered online, we'll send you a copy of those handouts. And another question is there a mailing list that they can sign up for to get the newest testing information when it becomes available?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes, we will take everybody's emails here tonight. Or if you want to provide an email, give us an email. We will keep you up to date with additional testing as we go through the future. This next batch of fish is probably going to take another year before we get those results. So just be patient with us. As Brandon said, he's sent 2,100 fish over to the lab for analysis, and so they're really backed up. So anyways, but yes, we will create a mailing list for this site and then just send out periodic updates so that everybody keeps up to date. And then that way you'll have our emails, and if you've got questions, feel free to definitely ask them. Anything else?
Nope.
Back about Warrior Lake and Lois Lake, the lawns are watered with water from Lois Lake. And every day that the lawns are watered, which quite frequently, at least every other day, not sometimes every day, that water hits the grass, we breathe the grass. Animals, they perhaps chew on the grass. The water hits my house every single day. There's leaks in my foundation, that water floods into my house. Wouldn't it be better if they were using a different source than water from Lois Lake to water the lawns? Wouldn't that be better?
Great question. And I'll let Mike jump in as well. I think that a couple of things with that. First thing is exposure. When you're talking about PFAS, it's not an inhalation issue. So it's not gonna, for the most part, there's a few of them, but for the most part, you're not talking about having to worry about breathing PFAS. It's getting into your basement, that's a whole different issue.
So yeah, and environmentally relevant concentrations, the concentrations you're gonna run into in the environment, inhalation and then dermal absorption are not significant exposure rates.
Yeah, so what you would need to do is talk to those folks that are responsible for doing that irrigation. And so could you change out the water source? Yes.
Yeah,
So-
what would it be if they weren't doing it? It would come from the city.
Would come from the city, and there would be a significant upcharge to use city water. I have absolutely no idea. I can tell you that my water bill watering my lawn, because I have a separate meter to do my yard, was $380 for 3 months. So you can imagine, you can do some multiplication there. So like everything in life, somebody's got to foot the bill. If you and others are willing to foot the bill, that would be one way. Another way would be to spend the money and drill a well, irrigation well, and hope that you could drill down to an area that was not PFAS contaminated. I don't know if you can or can't, but the options are pretty limited for irrigation well, city water, or a water body. So, but whichever one of those you choose, there's a cost associated with it. Cheapest to pump it from the lake, obviously, but that may not be the best idea.
And we do, have Rusty here from Kent County Health Department, who can talk about, permitting for those kinds of things.
Yeah, so without having a ton of information yet, I would say it's probably pretty unlikely we would permit a well in there. I know that you guys had a slide showing PFAS levels all the way down through most of those borings. We probably wouldn't allow it because there is an additional source with the municipal water.
But could allow it to come from the city water, they could change the city water, that would just cost more.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Could change it, but our HOA dues would be $800 a month.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's not for the faint of heart.
But we're not talking about Loomis Lake water being polluted, we're just talking about fish. This, right?
You can,
There's
well,
a difference here.
yeah, but there, I mean, based on the concentrations of the surface water we've taken out of those lakes, some of those lakes have, you know, some decent concentrations in the surface water as well. So think of it, when we go back to the PFAS cycle, you know, if you're using contaminated water to irrigate, then it's draining through your soil, it's going back into the groundwater, which is already contaminated, so you're probably not making it worse. But as you said, then that soil in your yards has probably got residual PFAS concentrations as well. And, you know, the bunnies that are in your hostas are probably eating some of it as well, so.
Yeah, Lewis and Porter and Lamar, we're all in the 30s. Our water quality value is 12. Our water quality value is protected of incidental ingestion through recreation, like accident swallows from water for swimming. And then 2 meals per month of fish consumption, and this is specifically for PFOS. So obviously there's an exceedance of our water quality value there in those lakes.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Katrina Furman. I am the Anishinaabe curator for the Grand Rapids Public Museum. And I am here basically on behalf of the museum. When the study was published, there was some concern, and we received some calls and some inquiries about how this has affected the historic Indian mounds over by the Grand River. And I just wanted to state that since this report was released, we have been in close contact with Eagle. We understand that there was some PFAS contamination detected in the pond adjacent to the mounds, but we also want to clarify that at no time was the mounds property accessed, nor were the mounds tested for PFAS. We are going to continue to work closely with Eagle and to monitor the report and basically see what next steps need to be taken, if any, to ensure the preservation of the historic mounds area. So I just wanted to let people know that. Perfect.
All right. Anything else for tonight? All right. Feel free to mingle, talk to staff. We don't have to be really kicked out of here till 8 o'clock, so we can stay and talk as long as you want. Otherwise, enjoy your night. And if you left us an email, we will send you a copy of the slides, and then you'll have it if you want to ask us any other follow-up questions. So thanks for coming.
Great job.